Good evening. Welcome, everyone, to the March 11th, 2020 City of Murfreesboro Planning Commission meeting. We will call the meeting to order, and we do have a quorum present, so we will get our meeting started quickly. I do have one item I'd like to bring up before we start the meeting, and that is that today Mr. Greg McKnight was officially appointed as our official planning director, no longer interim. So thank you, Greg. We're looking forward to working with you. So we'll start with our new business tonight, and we have 6 public hearings. Go over these. As you all know, I'll go ahead and mention before we get started on these that we're going to have 6 public hearings. Each of those public hearings, we will invite you to come forward to the podium to speak if you're interested in speaking on that particular item. Each person that comes to the podium will have 3 minutes to speak, either with their comments for or against the project. When you do come to the podium, you'll state your name, address, and you will make all of your comments directly to the Planning Commission, not to other members of the audience, the developers. All the comments tonight are for the Planning Commission, so we'll appreciate that, and also we'll appreciate everyone adhering to our 3-minute time limit so everybody can speak. Our first item tonight under new business is this zoning application to amend the Old Fort Plaza PUD for approximately 5.4 acres located along Old Fort Parkway in order to modify the site and building design. Autumn Plaza Partners is the applicant. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. The applicant, Autumn Plaza Partners, is requesting to amend the Old Fort Plaza planned unit development. They also refer to it as Autumn Plaza planned unit development. It is located at the southwest corner of Old Fort Parkway and Autumn Town Way. The request is to amend the planned unit development in order to modify the design of the buildings where they're sited, as well as the bedroom unit count and the location and architecture of the structures. This is a phased development. Phase 1 is already under construction, and that is a mixed-use building. Phase 2 is the apartments, and Phase 3 is the assisted living building. I provided some information in the staff report to help summarize what those changes are, but I'll just go through them very quickly. So the current request, the current approved number of units for the senior apartments is 52. That does remain the same with this modification, so it would remain as 52 units. What they are changing is the configuration of the bedroom count. So combined total, it was 76 beds. Some were 1-bedroom units, some were 2-bedroom units. With the new configuration, it will result in a total of 66 beds. So it will be 10 fewer beds, bedroom count. With the assisted living facility or building, it is currently approved for 85 units. What they're proposing to do is to change that. Will reduce down to 65 units. However, the number of beds will remain at 85. So basically, they're changing the configuration, how many of 1-bedroom units versus how many 2-bedroom units. So they're going to be reducing the number of 2-bedroom units and increasing the number of 1-bedroom units. So it's a net reduction in beds. It's a net reduction in units, but the number of beds remains the same. Why this is all important is because it does affect how we calculate our parking. Our parking is based upon the number of 1-bedroom units and 2-bedroom units. So overall, for these 2 buildings, with those changes, it does reduce the required parking from 136 parking spaces down to 126 parking spaces. That gives them a little bit more room for their buildings, and we also increase the buffer along the west property line to provide a little bit more distance between the building and the required landscape buffer, so that way it can accommodate that particular growth. The architectural design was the other thing that got changed. The building materials remain the same, which is predominantly brick facade with some ephes in the cornice. and limestone lintels above the windows and doors. The program book and in the staff report shows the prior architecture in contrast to the new architecture, so you can refer to that to see the differences. Staff feels that the new architecture is an improved design and will be compatible with what's existing out there. So quickly, the adjacent zoning and land uses to the northwest and east are CH, which is Highway Commercial District. To the southeast is multifamily residential, RM16, and to the southwest is the unincorporated Rutherford RM density, single-family residential density out there. And there are single-family residential homes located at the southwest corner. The proposed zoning is consistent with the future land use map, which is multifamily residential. No additional land uses or changes to the land uses are proposed with this particular program book. The applicant's representative is here and wishes to make a presentation, and I'll entertain any questions from the Planning Commission if you have any of me, and I can turn it over to Mr. Eric Brock. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rush. Yeah, my name's Eric Brock. I'm with Weiser Consultants, and I'm here representing Autumn Plaza Partners, the developers of this development. And as Ms. Rush told you, it was originally approved, back in 2016, and since then there's been a change of architect, which produced some changes in the building shape and the ratio of the bedrooms, and but we worked with the staff in order to remediate all of the questions that they had about providing the buffer and the landscaping and all the required amenities that'll be required. And so I don't really know all that much more than I can add, other than
You do have the PowerPoint is on there.
oh, okay. So I got the keys to this. So. These are just some photos, some overhead showing the location. Got a little updated aerial view. There were some existing apartment buildings that have been demolished at this point, and let's go on to the next here. This first photo to the left, that shows you the construction on Autumn Plaza, the phase 1, and the buildings in phases 2 and 3 will be of similar construction, and to my eyes are very presentable. A few other photos. We have the existing site on phase 2 in the upper right-hand corner. We've got stockpiles and some small fence line with trees in there, but we've got all the construction or the demolition, all the demolition materials out of the property. And the last picture on the bottom right shows you from the rear, which is going to be the phase 2 assisted living center. This just shows the square footage, well, the different phase 2 being the the independent living on the far south, then the assisted living facility in the center, and then the under construction Autumn Plaza frontage on the road. And they all access through Autumn Town Way, which is a joint use access easement with the Autumn Wood subdivision. This is just an overall of the phase 1 plan that's under construction. I think they're working on parking lot. With this weather, they've not had a lot of success with that. Here's the architectural renderings for that. Phase 2 plan, the senior living facility. All of our storm drainage is going to be routed through. There's the wet pond, which is directly east of the site, and then the dry pond to the south. We've got a joint stormwater agreement with the Autumnwood subdivision. And here's some architecturals. And phase 3, the final phase, is the assisted living center. I know that there's some of the architectural changes provided more common areas, kitchen areas. I know in the exterior, patio with a gazebo and some benches, and I think outdoor cooking facility. Landscaping is going to follow all the landscaping provisions in the zoning code. We're going to provide a type C buffer between the medium residential and the phase 2 site at the rear of the building. Well, the rear of the building, it faces west, and we'll have a few rows of larger evergreens, cypress or magnolia, and then another row of smaller, shorter, maybe boxwood, in order to, and then there is an existing tree line there with a lot of mature trees in there, and those we're going to take as much care as we can to preserve any and all of those trees along that line that will not interfere with the construction. This is a picture of a mock-up. Well, it was assigned at one of the other facilities, similar to what we're going to be proposing. We've got a lighting plan. The lights will be of this type, and let's see. There's the overall. And this is a little overlay exhibit just showing the reason for the amendment to the planned unit development. The current configuration of building in blue and the original in the green. So the actual shapes of the buildings change somewhat, more so with the phase 3 building. I think the phase 2 building, you just got a little wider in places and a little longer in others. But the same basic layout for the site entrances, the parking, the loading, and the trash enclosure are essentially the same as the original plan. Just move things around in order to accommodate topography and then the additional room we wanted along the west line and the residential areas. And that concludes my presentation.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Brock or staff? Mr. Brock, can I clarify one thing? If I'm looking at, for example, the overall plan, I'm looking at page 13. The landscaping along the driveway side, obviously the driveway is on an adjoining property owner, and I apologize if I missed this. Is this one property owner for the adjoining project and this project that we're looking at? So the driveway, or maybe that's a public road?
It goes to the existing Autumn Woods apartments. There's,
Okay.
you see at the very last entrance, there is, actually, there's a gate at that point right now. And there was an entrance built into the road when it was constructed, just, basically just left an open, curb opening there. And so there's a joint access easement. I don't know if this made a public street or not, but we've got addresses, on Autumn Town Way, so.
It just kind of looked like some of the landscaping was actually over on the adjoining property as opposed to on this property. And so that's why I was wondering if it's.
No, there's actually, I think, between the detention pond and the parking area, is that where you're?
I'm looking in front of the assisted living, the center area in front of the assisted living, where the landscaping extends out into that little circular area.
I think we're within the actual, the property line runs, I think is, I want to say 10 feet off of the edge of the curb line.
As long as all the landscaping is on the existing property.
We'll be submitting, we've got landscaping plans developed for each of the sites.
Okay.
If our cable department wants to switch to my computer, I've got the image up that you're referring to, and
Okay.
it certainly does look like there's landscaping off of the property. And this is the assisted living you were just mentioning. There's-
All the areas right there around both entrances to the assisted living and the center area. But just
Well, I can assure you that we'll stay within the property itself with our landscaping.
Would you be able to make that change to the program book,
Absolutely.
Eric? Okay.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Brock before we open the public hearing?
I've got one quick question. One of the things you've agreed to not have on the property is a wrap parlor. What is a wrap parlor?
I have no idea.
I don't know the exact definition. I will say that a wrap parlor falls within our adult-oriented uses section.
Okay.
So
Maybe
Well, it's good that I didn't know that.
So you just wanted to brag that you didn't know what that was.
I feel confident that we have a definition in our zoning ordinance, but I don't know it.
Okay, thank you.
I have a quick question. We made reference to the changed elevations, and did we see a before and after from the conceptual to the revised plan on the change in the elevation?
The architectural renderings, we don't have, we have the old renderings in the old program book, but they're not a part of the new program book.
It was in this.
That just wasn't anywhere.
This is the
That's the curve. and this is
proposed,
the new
yeah.
one.
Gotcha. Like they took their bell tower out. Yeah, current and proposed.
Okay, we'll review these. Oh, go ahead. Ward.
I have one question. I know when we talked about this in the planning session, the building on the assisted living moved all the way to the line. Are we comfortable with that from a planning department? Because it looks like it shifted, because the blue is what the new building is, right?
Right, absolutely.
Right, so it shifted all the way over to the line. Are we comfortable?
It's at the, it's currently at the setback line, And for that portion, there's no buffer required, it's just perimeter planning.
Okay, 'cause
So
that was- I
staff
do
felt
remember
pretty
that.
confident that that would work with that interface, yeah.
Okay, because I know that was the concern we had, was the planning inside of that. So,
Yeah, it definitely was of concern with the building all the way to the south, the Phase 2 building, because that being a type C buffer is much more densely planted, and to have the building right up against that would have been problematic.
okay,
Yeah, we're actually butting up against the racetrack that's under construction and on the Phase 3 portion.
So it's commercial,
Yeah.
correct?
thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, thank you, Mr. Brock.
Thank
We
you.
may call you back up afterwards if there's any questions. So we'll open the public hearing and ask anyone that would like to speak on this item to please come forward. Okay. All right, then we will close the public hearing. Ask if there are any other questions or comments from the Planning Commission.
If there are none, I'll make a motion to approve, subject to all staff comments.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Moving on to item B. This is a zoning application for approximately 0.36 acres located along East Vine Street and South Bilbro Avenue to be rezoned from RS8 to PRD. Bilbro and Vine Towns PRD. Greg Stanley is the applicant. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you, Chair Jones. This property is located at the northwest corner of East Vine Street and south of Bilbro Avenue. The property consists of 2 parcels with 0.36 acres. The parcels are currently developed with a single-family dwelling and a non-conforming triplex, and they are zoned RS8. The applicant wishes to rezone the properties to planned residential district. The proposed PRD would consist of a 5-unit townhome development called Bilbro and Vine Towns. The proposed gross density would be 13.8 dwelling units per acre. Development would have direct access to East Vine Street and a single access point, with no connections to neighboring properties being proposed. The proposed development would include 1 building with 5 3-story townhouse units. The end unit to the north, adjacent to the RS15 zone, is actually going to be a two-story unit. All units will have a rear entry 2-car garage, and in order to meet the City Core overlay requirements of 10 parking stalls, these garages must be dedicated for the parking of motor vehicles only. The development would include an additional 3 surface parking spaces for the residents of the 5 2-bedroom townhomes and their guests. Primary exterior materials would include brick, stone, and cementous siding. Minimum building setbacks for the development would be 18 feet along the front on South Bilbro Avenue, and East Vine Street would be 21 feet on the north side and 14.3 feet on the west side. And the pattern book states the development would include approximately 35% of the total lot as open space. The site is proposed to also contain 5% formal open space consisting of a courtyard seating area with a decorative fence along East Vine Street and stamped concrete patio area with bench seating and a dog run at the rear of the property. The proposed exception to the zoning ordinance would include a hedgerow along the sidewalk on South Bilbro Avenue and East Vine Street in lieu of the 3-foot required base of building planting yard. The adjacent surrounding zoning includes an RS8 and RS15 to the west, RS8 to the north, RS8 to the south across East Vine Street, and RS15 to the east across South Bilbro Avenue. Surrounding land uses primarily include single-family residential and multifamily residential uses. The proposed development would include a 6-foot white vinyl privacy fence along both the north and west property lines. The future land use map recommends that the subject property develop with a suburban residential land use character. The comprehensive plan calls out RS 15, RS 12, and RS 10 as existing zoning districts that are compatible with this designation. A 2.0 to a 3.54 dwelling units per acre is the recommended density. Single-family attached residential uses are consistent with suburban residential land use character in certain circumstances. The more intense single-family residential attached use that is proposed at 13.8 dwelling units per acre is not consistent with the vision of the suburban residential land use character. The subject property's current zoning, RS 8, would allow for a slightly higher density than what is recommended with the suburban residential land use character. The development more closely resembles the auto-urban general residential land use character. However, the proposed density exceeds what is recommended for that land use character as well. The characteristics of auto-urban general residential include detached and detached residential dwelling units with compatible land open space requirements, less openness and separation between dwellings, interior yard consumed by driveway and off-street parking, and a density of 3.54 to 8.64 dwelling units per acre. The Planning Commission will need to determine whether this is an appropriate instance to deviate from the recommendations of the future land use map. A copy of the pattern book has been included in your agenda materials. The applicant is available here this evening to make a presentation regarding the proposed rezoning and to answer any questions. After that, the Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing, after which it will need to discuss this matter and formulate a recommendation to City Council.
Thank you, Ms. Kerr. Good evening, Mr. Roundtree.
Good evening. Matthew, is this close by? Where are we on there? Bill, we're going there. Okay, thank you. Sure. All right, Chairman Jones, Planning Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree, Leslie Still Engineering, and I'm here representing Mr. Greg Stanley, and he's here if there's any questions for the potential owner-developer of this project. And also, Mr. Michael Pickelsheimer is here, who's the architect on the project. And as Amelia mentioned, it is basically a project that is surrounded by RS-15 and RS-8, and that's important to understand because it does have a little bit of an impact on how we approach the project. This is in the CCO, so we've always approached this as more of an urban infill type of project. And as we'll look at the existing conditions slide, this shows you some of the adjacent relationships to this building. If you look to across the street, directly across the street from our development, are 2 apartment complexes that Michael's going to talk about the architecture, but the character of our building, the scale of our building is very much consistent with the buildings across the street. There is a 1-story building on our right-hand side, basically to the north of us. And that building, Michael was very sensitive to basically scale down the architecture on that particular side of the building to kind of transition down to a smaller home that's on the north. And as Amelia mentioned, that's the 2-story portion of the structure. Behind us are single-family homes, currently rental homes, and the homes we're displacing are they have some history to them. One of them is a round building that everyone knows, the round white building in Murfreesboro. That's one building that'll be going down. The other building's a larger structure, but it's in pretty bad shape. So 2 buildings will be raised as a result of this development. There's the round building, the bottom left-hand corner. Picture is the white building that has, I guess it's an octagon or some form of a shape like that. Catty corner to our development are some more apartments. They're 1-story apartments, but they're directly catty corner to us. And the building on the top left corner on this image is basically the 1-story home that is adjacent to us to the north. There are apartments across the street, and as I mentioned, the picture of the building in the center is the apartment complex that's directly across the street. The scale of our building will very much be in character with that. Overall site plan, as Amelia mentioned, there's a formal open space along East Vine Street. The building has an L shape. The reason it's an L shape is for that two-story component of the building, and that allows our parking. The parking is basically to the rear of the building. And I have had some discussions with the neighbors adjacent to this property, and one of the biggest concerns was making sure that there's a nice transition to their home, making sure they like the idea of the two-story being there because it really sets the scale from their vantage point and kind of screens the three-story portion of the building. They were asking about lighting. Right now, all the lighting, and Mike will get more into that, but it's all basically undermounted to, there's a little line you can see on the back of the building. That is a small patio area, a small balcony area off the second floor, and that'll have down lights. It'll basically shine onto the garage doors. So there won't be any lighting that projects off-site, and that was a real concern for the neighbors. The last concern that came out, and Amelia mentioned this, there's two formal open spaces. One is basically along East Vine, which is basically a courtyard patio. The other is a dog run area that's in the back corner. And I've talked to Mr. Stanley. We're willing to change that if it would be the pleasure of the commissioners to do so. What their concern is the neighbor next door has a dog, they have a dog, everyone has a dog on that corner. So they're visualizing a lot of noise as a result of the dog park being in that location. And I did mention there's not a lot of other locations for a dog run area, although we could keep the formal space there. It may just not be a dog run. And that may make Eddie happy, maybe. So as far as the building itself is concerned, there are 2 car parking spaces for each of the units, and then there are 3 additional spaces for guest parking. And with the new CCO requirements, that was one of the keys, is that we've reduced the parking requirement in this area to allow 1 car per bedroom. And as Amelia mentioned, it is stated that these will be committed. It's back in our notes on the back of the book as far as these are committed to parking. They're not a storage component to the home, so we have to keep those parking spaces open for the residents. And there is a little additional striped area, and that's primarily for turning for the cars that back out on the end unit to get out of the parking lot. It is an enclosed parking area, so it has a gated entrance and a perimeter fence around it to kind of enhance the privacy of the unit and also to screen the parking from the adjacent neighbors. Michael's going to come up and speak about the architecture. As far as the landscape architecture that was referenced, the biggest change that we're asking for is more of a traditional approach to landscaping. So we want to pull the landscaping away from the foundation out to the road to give the landscaping more of a foreground component. And that'll be a boxwood hedge that really kind of, it's a throwback kind of more to traditional landscaping. So around the perimeter building really would be grass and very clean, and then out towards the road would be the landscaping itself. So that's where we're deviating from the ordinance, but it's really about the character of the building. So with that, Michael, if you want to talk about the structure.
All right. I'm Mike Picklesheimer. I'm the architect. The front of the building is the second from the top on the right-hand side. That's a side facing Bilbro. The concept on this was to develop a building that didn't look like a bunch of individual townhouses, but took on kind of the East Main Street, big, larger house overall look. And as mentioned before, we're doing a continuous stone base across it. We're doing 2 different primary brick colors to do some offsets across the front. And then on the back side, above the garages would be where we have the cement fiberboard siding. As we talked about before, on the far right-hand side, which is the north, we scaled down to a 2-story, being conscious of the property next door being a smaller house compared to the others in the neighborhood, and then stepped it up to 3 as we went south. If you have any particular questions, I'm not sure what else to add to it.
Any questions for Mr. Picklesheimer? Okay, thank you. Okay, any other questions from Planning Commission before we open the public hearing? Okay. We will open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak either for or against this item.
I'm Ron Taylor. We live at 816 East Main Street. We're the actually only property owners that are right next to this property, and we love it. We appreciate the Main Street design on the front, on the Bellbro side. We appreciate the way the parking cars actually, I think you actually have to have a HOV license to get a parking space. And we welcome it to our neighborhood. We need these kind of changes on Vine Street, all down Bellbro. So maybe this will start a chain reaction, so to speak, and a positive. And you don't believe me, do you? But anyway, it's true. No, seriously, we looked at, I had a nice meeting down at the planning department and all, and I've seen all the drawings, and it's a real blessing to our neighborhood. So, and we thank you and we appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And we appreciate you coming out with positive comments. It's very unusual for us. Anybody else? Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Any other comments or questions from the Planning Commission?
I didn't want to interrupt his comments, but it is delightful to see somebody come forward and say we're really excited about a project. And I think this is going to be a very positive impact on not just your neighborhood, but the entire downtown area. I think it's very appropriate, very fitting. Unless there's anybody else with comments, I'll move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. Moving on, our next public hearing is a zoning application for approximately 2.42 acres located along East College Street, North Spring Street, East Lytle Street, and North Church Street to be rezoned from OGR to PUD, 1 East College PUD. 705 4th Avenue South Holding Company is the applicant. Ms. Kerr.
Thank you. This property is located at the 100 block of East College Street and North Spring Street. The property is approximately 2.42 acres and is developed with the former location of the First United Methodist Church and Franklin Synergy Bank. The property presently is zoned OGR and CCO. The applicant wishes to rezone the property to planned unit development district. The proposed PUD 1 East College would be constructed in 5 stages and would consist of mixed uses, including residential living, office, hotel, retail, restaurants, a parking garage, and refurbishing the existing church sanctuary and bell tower as an event space or restaurant. The zoning request will not remove the property from the CCO. The proposed development would include one 56,215 square foot, 4-story mixed-use building for retail, restaurants, and a small police precinct on the street level, and offices on the upper 3 floors, and the overall height of the building is to be 64 feet. It will also include a 6-story, 110-room hotel building with 54,273 square feet of area, including some retail on the 1st floor with an overall height of 72 feet. The proposed parking garage building is 8.5 stories, including 1 parking level below grade, and consists of 627 required parking spaces, including on-street parking and handicap spaces. An agreement within this plan will provide 155 non-dedicated parking spaces within the parking garage and 45 on-street parking spaces for a total of 200 non-dedicated parking spaces. As an exception to this plan, there will be 25% of the spaces within the parking structure that will be compact spaces. These spaces will be spread out among the separate floors of the garage. The parking garage will be surrounded with 5 stories of residential units with an additional 4 stories of penthouse residential units on the top parking garage along East Lytle Street for a total of 156 1-bedroom, studio, 2-bedroom, and 3-bedroom dwelling units with a total square footage of 185,634 square feet and a density of 64.64 dwelling units per acre. The dwelling units and parking garage overall height is 145 feet. The First United Methodist Church Sanctuary in Bell Tower will be restored and repurposed for a possibility of an event center or a restaurant. The proposed amenities for the residential buildings will include a fitness center and a clubhouse for the dwelling units surrounding the parking garage, and a rooftop terrace for the penthouse dwelling units. Amenities will also include a gated dog park between the hotel and the residential buildings, and gated promenade with green space and seating area for residents between the retail office building and the residential parking building. Public amenities will include a public outdoor plaza area and bicycle parking racks. The property surrounded to the south and the west with the CBD with multiple businesses, offices, restaurants, and centers for the art. Properties to the north and east are zoned OGR. To the north, consistent of a mixture of residential uses and small businesses, and to the east are small businesses and the location of the First Presbyterian Church. The Rutherford County Judicial Building lies to the northwest and is zoned Planned Institutional District, and the southeast corner adjacent to the subject property is zoned Commercial Highway District. The future land use map recommends that downtown mixed use Central Business District is the most appropriate land use character for the property. Compatible existing zoning districts are Central Business District, Mixed Use District, and Planned Unit Districts. Examples of development types in the downtown Mixed Use Central Business District land use character include an active mix and concentration of uses and public gathering event spaces in a main street setting. Recommended allowable uses include multifamily residential uses, entertainment, restaurant, department stores, and other retail and professional general offices and hotels. This land use character is also characterized by streets and other public spaces framed by buildings with zero minimum front setbacks, creating an architectural enclosure. It is staff's opinion that the proposed zoning request is consistent with the recommendation of the future land use map of the 2035 comprehensive plan. A copy of the pattern book has been included in the agenda materials. The applicant is in attendance to make a presentation regarding the proposed rezoning and to answer any questions. After that, the Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing, after which it will need to discuss this matter and formulate a recommendation for City Council.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kerr. Good evening, Mr. Taylor.
Good evening, Chairman Jones, members of the Planning Commission. I am Matt Taylor from SCC. I'm accompanied tonight by several people. I'll introduce those briefly. Mr. Brian Davis, who represents the ownership side of this project, as well as Mr. Jeff Reed, local attorney, Mr. Bart Klein from Klein Sweeney Associates. He's the architect for the project, and then Mr. John Harney from Parks Group. It is our pleasure and it's our pleasure to give you a brief presentation tonight over what we have termed One East College. I think this is proposed on a piece of land and a project that each of you are familiar with. We've talked about this for several years, ever since the city bought this property from the previous owners. So we'll start with the property itself. As Ms. Kerr said, it is about a 2.4 acre city block. It's bound on the north by Lytle Street, the east by North Spring, the south by College, and the west by North Church Street. Most of the site today is an open parking lot. There's about 3 buildings here. 2 of those buildings are old financial institutions. Those both will be removed. The existing church in the southwest corner of the property will remain, will be restored, and be a vital part of our development. As Ms. Kerr also said, the property is owned OGR today. Our properties to the north and east are zoned in the same manner, and properties to the south and west are CBD. Our existing uses around us vary greatly, as most downtown uses do. We've got tattoo parlors, bed and breakfast, pharmacies, church, as well as Center for the Arts. The design of the site itself consists of 4 buildings totaling almost 500,000 square feet spread across that 2.4 acres. Those 4 buildings are linked together by well-designed pedestrian plazas shown in the red area here. And then the whole development will be anchored by a parking garage located in the northeast corner of the project. Between the parking garage and the on-street parking, we're providing over 600 spaces for our project, as well as the surrounding areas to use. That parking garage will be accessed by 2 points. One of those is on Lytle Street, the other is on North Spring Street. Our office retail building is located in the northwest quadrant of this property. It's a 4-story building, as Ms. Kerr said. The bottom floor is envisioned to be a retail, restaurant, and police precinct, while the upper 3 floors will be office. We don't have any specific tenants for any of these buildings yet, but we do envision the office component to be heavy on the legal side, given the proximity to the judicial center. Caddy corner to that, in the southeast corner of the project, is our 6-story, 110-room hotel. It will front on East College Street. Our lobby is at about the mid-block on East College Street. We will have a passenger drop-off zone there. That was a point of conversation in our neighborhood meeting earlier this week, and that space is big enough for about 5 vehicles to park at any one time, which we think will be more than enough for that particular use. Directly north of that will be the garage and residential building. Those residences will completely wrap the garage. You will not see the garage from the street. And then on top of that garage will be an additional 4 stories of penthouse units. We think are going to provide some of the best and most spectacular views that we have in Murfreesboro today. And then last but definitely not least, in the southwest corner of the property is the existing church. That will remain. We're going to restore that. We are going to replace the stained glass windows that were previously taken out. We're going to look for any structural damage, mortar damage, and completely restore and wash that, and then open that back up. We hope to have an entertainment venue there, but again, we have not signed anyone yet. All of these uses and buildings will be under the guidance and maintenance of an owners association. All people, all owners here will be a member of that. The building design, we tried to pull from some aspects of downtown, such as the materials. And so you'll see a lot of brick, stone, a limited amount of EIFS, and storefront windows where it's appropriate on this design. We can't replicate downtown. That was obviously designed and developed over many years, decades probably is more appropriate. And so you really can't replicate that. So we're trying to take aspects of that and make them our own. So you'll see that we've very well defined entryways into our building. We've got multiple building planes along each street. We've integrated vertical elements with those planes. You combine that with our streetscape elements, with street trees and lighting. It's going to be a very pedestrian-friendly development around the perimeter as well as internal to the project. To go through some of the architectural renderings, this is looking on College Street, looking at the hotel. You know where that entrance is as soon as you look at that. That curved feature is very unique. In the background, you see the outer portion of the residential building, and then to the left, you see just the back corner of the existing sanctuary. Pull back from that, you get a real good feel of the scale and how the proportions work between the hotel and the church here. We are taking some elements from the church, such as the brick. We're trying to stay in the same color family with our bricks, but we don't want to mimic, we don't want to repeat the church. We want to complement it. We want to respect the church. We want it to stand on its own. This is almost exactly opposite of the last picture. This is at the corner of Lytle and Spring Street, looking back at the residential. Again, we've carried the curved corner to this aspect as well. It's going to stand out. You see the balconies. You know where to walk into this building. A lot of interest in these elevations. Going down Lytle Street, here you see multiple elements to our project. You see the office building starting on the right-hand side of this picture. You see our promenade plaza in between that and the residential building. You also see an entrance to our garage. You see how that's downplayed, how it's going to blend in very well to that building. This pulls back more toward MTSU, several hundred feet up in the air, just kind of lets you see that whole block, how to interact from the air together and how it fits in with the rest of downtown. This is going back toward really the intersection of Lytle and North Church. You see more of the office building here. Still see some of the residential building in the background. You see we've introduced more windows and glazing in that office building. And then this is going back up North Church. The church would be just off the screen here to the right. You get to see the full length of the building, of the office building. You see we've incorporated a limited number of curved windows to go back toward the courthouse. Then you also see the residential building in the background here. We know that we're developing a very compact and urban project, but with all of those, our tenants, our residents, our visitors, our patrons still expect amenities on the site. And so we think that we've got an abundance of amenities. The first and foremost of those is location. We've got great access back to restaurants that are open from breakfast all the way through dinner in our downtown area. We've got great access to some public areas such as the city's plaza out front here, back to the historic courthouse, even over to the Judicial Center. We also think that our uses here are going to add amenities through restaurants, entertainment venues that will not only contribute to our project, it'll contribute to the downtown and the city as a whole. Internal to our project, Ms. Kerr mentioned a few. We will have some rooftop terraces in the residential as well as a gym. The hotel will come up with its own amenities. We would anticipate the standard items there. No outdoor pool for the hotel. One of the strongest amenities that we'll have that'll be open to the public will be our plaza areas. That will really surround the church. We think that's going to be a very special area. We've designed that to have a mixture of hardscapes and greenscapes, as well as potential for some artwork out there. This rendering, I think, really puts you down in as a pedestrian level, lets you see the intricacies. We think this area is going to be a very active area, a lot of energy. This is where our hotel residents are going to come onto the project at. People will be hanging out here. So a very active zone. Directly north of that is more plaza area. But here it will take on a different element. I think we talked about in the workshop a little bit. We're going to gate this off. That will be open during the day, but at some point in the evening, we've not defined a time. It'll probably be associated with dusk or maybe business hours. We will lock that off, and so that our residents have a private retreat area. So this is what we envision this area to turn out like. A lot of seating areas, very active zone, a lot of vegetation, intricate lighting. So I think it's going to be one of the special places downtown for our residents. And then all of you been here, you've seen the evolution of amenities. One of the most popular amenities over the past couple years has become dog parks. So we've definitely planned that. It's planned in between the residential building and the hotel. That's where we think it'll get the most use, is the most appropriate. And so we anticipate that to be an artificial turf ground. This is not a doggy daycare. It is a 15 to 30-minute exercise area where the owners of the dogs should be here all the time. That will be governed and maintained and watched over by the Owners Association. Our uses are very much downtown uses. I think that's what we wanted here, and so we've allowed residential, hotels, the police precinct, retail, offices, and restaurant, to name a few. A full list is in the book, but those are very downtown-oriented, mixed-use. And the architect has put together a brief video, if I can get it to work. Well, I guess it's going to work. So, but we will try to get that to work before the next meeting. I did want to let you know that we did host a neighborhood meeting on Monday evening at the First Presbyterian Church that is just to the east of this project. We sent out about 430 letters, I believe. We had about 70 or 75 attendees. It was a good conversation. We walked through the project much like I have here tonight. I think that in general it was received well. There were some concerns about impacts during construction. We're committed to reducing those impacts as much as we can. We probably will not reduce all the impacts, but we will keep those to a minimum. And then we think that it was received well, had some good compliments, probably have a couple of disagreements over architecture, but we probably have that on most projects. So we think that we're putting forth a very attractive project that'll be successful and be something the city will be proud of for years to come. So myself or any member of the team will be happy to answer any questions now or after the hearing. Yes.
Matt, on page 16, the aerial perspective, letter B, the penthouse, or if that's what they're called, units, what are they looking down upon? What is this area right here?
So that'd be the top of the parking garage.
Okay. And then are those quote-unquote windows just open? Is that what I'm seeing?
So there'll be a certain amount of, it's probably best described as maybe a balcony that's covered, and then there will be some others that are true windows in there.
So, but it just looks like that they're open air.
Oh, you're talking about on the side of the garage?
Yeah.
Yes, that would be open. A knockout panel is probably the best way to describe that.
So they'll mimic the look of a window, but their opening is directly into the parking structure.
But there's no parking here, is there?
Yes. The parking actually comes up, so where you see that wall come up above the roof.
Oh, I see. Okay, I'm with you.
So the residential building is 5 stories,
Yes.
and then the garage itself is 8. And so it'll extend up a couple of extra stories. There's probably a difference in height between those, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you've got the 4 additional stories of residential on top of that garage itself.
Okay.
And in that same picture, the additional, like, what looks like blacktop area, is that just rooftop?
It is roof, yes.
But it is not rooftop that would be accessible by the residents?
No, the rooftop that will be accessible by the residents will be at the top of the, I guess you call it a tower element. You see the one portion that's a little taller than the rest?
Uh-huh. The darker black
Yes.
roof on
Yeah,
it.
that's a roof over that rooftop element
Okay,
right there.
okay.
Can you guys see the material boards? Do I need to hold them up or? Yeah. So there's one for each building.
Matthew, tell me about, I want to make sure I understand the parking numbers correctly. So on page 8, you have a parking provided number of 627. On page 9, your table shows provided including shared at 692.
I think that was an old number. We were bouncing around depending on levels of garages, so we need to update the table on 9. So it is 627.
Okay. And just so I understand, open public spaces, that number would also probably change on your table, but those are above and beyond what the requirement is for each space within all the buildings, correct?
So the way that we described, so we've got 495, I think, that's required. And so what we've said as unreserved or uncommitted would also take into account the bottom floor retail. And so we would not be setting to the side the like we would set aside for residential and office and a certain amount of hotel. We would not necessarily set aside anything for the retail or event space. And then we would not designate the on-street parking because that would still be public, controlled by the city.
And is that regulated at all? Is the garage?
The garage,
Or how do you,
it will be. And so right now, what we're envisioning is you'll have a key fob for certain components for, the ones that are assigned. And then you'll probably get an hour or two of free parking. And then you'd start getting charged after that. So it will be gated. It would be a little different than what, I think City Hall was originally set up as a gate, if I remember right. That's been abandoned for at least 15 years. And then the Judicial Center right now is not, but ours would be from the get-go.
and then on page 8, there, I could see where you put the fence and gate in the promenade right behind the residential area. There's another fence and gate between residential and hotel. Can you tell me what that blocks off?
That would block off for the dog park. And so, and then the opposite end of that would probably best, it has a fence too, but part of that is a gate where the compactor, or a wall where the compactor will be. And so it probably does not show up as well because we have a smaller area of fence.
So is the lower left-hand corner of the garage and residential building the access point for after-hours on the retail side, getting into the garage to get to their car?
So going between the retail and the garage, that will be open to a certain point. And I think some of that's probably going to be governed by our usage as far as who we wind up having as tenants when they close down and when they need to access that lobby space over in the office. But yes, there would be an access point in the southwest corner there. And then I think you could also come out on Lytle Street and walk around if somebody wanted to.
I'm just thinking of the person that parks in the lower right-hand corner but wants to hit the restaurant up on the retail side on the corner of Lytle and.
We do have two pedestrian, it's not really shown up. You can go to this plan. Okay, so we have a pedestrian access here that's going to go through the parking garage. So if you park your car, you can go through the residential on the first floor. It'll be secured with a different set of doors and access the office. Also on the hotel side, it's happening right here. We have access that goes through the first floor of the garage, through the residential, so you can access the hotel. So you don't have to walk around the block. You can park, go 60 feet, get to your use, or wherever you're going. Now we'll have to figure out a way with the one that's going through this, when this is shut off at night, that we have not contemplated how that's going to work yet, to be honest.
And I'm sorry, if you don't mind, go ahead. I don't think for the record, when you started speaking, go ahead and state your name. And
My name is Bart Klein with Klein Swinney Associates.
Thank you, Mr. Klein.
So going back to the parking garage, that these facade windows, so I'm assuming you're not going to be able to see the cars parked through those windows, even if they're open, that the cars would be at a level below the, we'll call it the window, correct?
We will, at a minimum, if we have an opening, we'll have 42 inches from the finished floor of the parking garage up.
I'm with you.
But at the same time, since you have the residential that wraps the parking garage that's 5 stories up, there's really no, you're not going to even.
Sight, you won't
your
be able to
sight
see it.
view,
Okay.
you're not going to see.
I just think that would take away from, if you could see the cars parked, in an opening, especially with a project like this, so.
If they can put this screen back up on the monitor, I think we can point out exactly what you're talking about there, Mr. Halliburton. So this is probably the best view. We're at street level, at about where somebody will be standing, and so that is the wall that you're talking about. So you can see that it's set back, and so it very much helps that screening, and all you see is that very top window, which would block.
Right,
any.
okay.
So if you're on the 5th floor of the courthouse looking across, you might see something through a gap.
Yes.
But other than that, from street view, you certainly would not.
Correct, correct.
Can you walk us through a quick phasing and build out?
So the first thing that you'll start to see construction on after demolition would be the garage itself, and that's just from a constructability standpoint. You've got to have that built before you can do any of the residential or the penthouse units, and so that would be the first thing. The second item is probably going to be the office retail building, and then we would flip back to probably the hotel and then go on the residential from there. The church, as soon as kind of the site's stabilized, we get a tenant, that could go almost at any time because it's got parking around it, it's got its utilities, it's really a restoration, but I think the time frame of getting a tenant there is gonna drive that schedule. And we think that it's gonna be about a 2.5-year project. We hope to pull our first permits this summer, and so that puts us finishing in late '22, if I did my math right.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we open the public hearing? Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor.
Thank you.
We'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak on this item. Hello.
My name is Keith Beckman. I'm a pharmacist, and we own Beckman's Prescription Shop, which will be, I guess, located at the southeast corner, just directly across from the hotel. My main concern here is just keeping our patients and our customers who've been with us for so long having access and medical attention that we can give them consistently. I think the project looks fantastic. I think I'm welcoming that. For potential new patients, new customers. But the concern of mine really lies with, are we going to have, security that our elderly patients can really get down there and get access to us like they always have been. And that's where I don't know if this is a proper place to do this, but I mean, during construction phases, we're talking about 2.5 years. I just don't want people to get down to the point where it's easier to go to CVS or Walgreens than to come to us, just because of what's going on across the street. And that's where my main concern lies with this. I'm excited about the project. I think it'll bring great potential to our business and give us a lot of avenues and revenues there. But just to kind of keep that in mind as we move forward, because I think attention has been placed even to the north. And I kind of brought this up at the neighborhood meeting, what attention has been made to the south, where we lie. And as long as we have access to be able to have people come through our drive-through and even exit back out without congesting our parking lot, because our parking lot consists of about 5 places. And that's where my concern lies. I just wanted to put that out there. So thank you
very much. Appreciate it.
Good point, because when the courthouse was being built, being that our office is very near there, the businesses that face the courthouse, there was times when that was difficult. So we would hope that the contractor would think about that, because them and actually Milano's is going to have the same problem depending on if any part of that street's closed off, because they're not going to have any access.
Next.
My name's Bob Woods. For the past 40 years, I've operated a country ham shop on Lytle Street. So I'm somewhat familiar with the neighborhood, and I'm somewhat familiar with the way the city addresses parking in downtown Murfreesboro. When the Lytle Street project came in, we were promised more parking places. But as a result, we lost 40% of the parking between Front Street and Maple. So I'm a little apprehensive when I see the parking that this project is going to provide for their project. I think closer consideration should be given to the numbers that they're putting out for their parking. One example would be the 56,000 square foot office building. They're only allowing 115 parking places. And if you go by 300 square foot for one parking place, that's about 190 parking places. And the 200 parking places that they're saying that are going to be undesignated, well, there's already about 140 parking places on that lot currently, and there are about 30 parking places around the street that are currently there. So the 200 additional parking places they're saying they're adding are actually already on site presently that are going to be displaced when they build this project. So I just think I'm not against this project. I think it will be good for downtown. It would probably help my business with the increased traffic flow, but I do think serious consideration should be given to the parking situation. I think if this project goes through, the city council is going to need to address the parking seriously for the downtown area. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Woods. Anybody else?
I'm Charlene Taylor, and I'm the happy person on East Main Street with the Bilbro project. And I did not intend to say anything, but I felt like I must, because there seems to be an absence of folks here that in this well-attended meeting that was at First Presbyterian 2 nights ago. The point of what I'd like to make is this: having grown up in Murfreesboro and been a watcher on the walls of Murfreesboro, I would like to see all of you take a very close look at the architectural elements. It's the big missing point here. It's a great idea. It's a grand idea. It could be part of the of this community. We all know in this room that the icon of Rutherford County is the courthouse. And the city of Murfreesboro is lacking of that icon. Not any of you could say, this is our icon. This represents who we are. But this is a great beginning of a new part of the history of Murfreesboro. We're living in that time. We are seeing that in the leadership. We're seeing that in all of you that are poised to bring positive change. I don't know which words to use of finials and whatever it could be architecturally. I use the word, and I don't think that you are seeing the notes, by the way. There are enough Facebook comments that would concern you about the architecture alone. But most people appear to be very excited to see something like this be generated. But how can I say this to friends? It lacks the imagination of where we're going. It lacks the poetry, the soul of the city. It seems to have a sameness. And I don't think anybody here really is applauding what they see on these pages. I say that with an assumption, but I say it meaning from the heart. I love Murfreesboro. I really do. I think most of you, or all of you, do. I know many of you pretty well. We've grown up together. So I'm asking you to just take a moment. I think what can come from this group is very important. And I'm asking you to take a real moment and look at the architecture. What draws you there? What type of hotel would we market to? Who would be the most interested? So I don't want to lose that opportunity, and it does come down to architecture. I like where we're going, John, and those of you that have put so much time. It will be so valuable to the new Murfreesboro. It really will. So that's what I would ask of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Taylor. Who else? Okay. So we will close the public hearing. And what other questions do we have? Comments?
I would like staff to help explain the 25% shared parking reduction number in the calculations to me, please.
The way that we worked with them on their parking calculations, the parking for the office and the retail building, as well as the existing church, that was all used as neighborhood parking. We have an actual neighborhood shopping center parking count that's 250 square feet, 250, one parking spot for every 250 square foot of building area. So that's where you're going to get the retail office floor, 224 spaces. And then you add also the 22 spaces for the church building. So that gives you 246. The residential portion of the building, we calculated that using the CCO regulations, which is one parking spot for each one bedroom, and then for each 2 and 3 bedroom units, you had to have 2 cars. So those are solid 200 spaces, and then the 110 hotel room spaces will be reserved for that. And then the 25% shared reduction is a CCO regulation. Whenever you have on-street parking, you do have the opportunity for having a 25% reduction in the commercial use portion of the neighborhood market area.
Ms. Garland, if I could just add on to what Ms. Kerr was saying, the way that we calculated parking, we try to be consistent with the formulas that we have in our zoning ordinance for the various uses, as well as consistent with what our city core overlay district regulations, which were adopted recently, say the reductions that it would allow. And so we use the same formulas for the residential that our CCO would allow for single family residential units. The hotel room was 1 space per room, and the easiest way to calculate the 4-story building and the church, which will be either an event space or a restaurant, would be to lump that together as a neighborhood shopping center, which is kind of a conglomeration of commercial uses, and we just use a straight 1 to 250 ratio for that. What the CCO regulations state is that commercial uses, if you have adjacent on-street parking, you can take a 25% reduction. So I don't know that shared parking reduction is probably the right way to put it. I think it's more of if there is on-street parking adjacent to the property, then you can take a 25% reduction, but that only applies to the commercial uses. A hotel is technically considered a residential use, and the condos are going to be residential, so we took the 25% reduction off of just what was considered the neighborhood shopping center. And so that put us, as Mr. Taylor mentioned, at a required number of spaces at 495. They don't have 200 spaces above and beyond 495. They have a total of 615 non-handicap spaces, including the adjacent on-street parking. But what they're saying is that even though the surplus number of spaces isn't 200, they're committing to leaving a minimum of 200 spaces as unreserved, so that they would be open to the public, and that they wouldn't be reserved for the residents of the condos or for the occupants of the office spaces. That's a little bit of background on how we arrived at the parking calculations.
And if the church building were to be a restaurant, how would you calculate that for a 5,300 square foot restaurant? I know it depends on the number of tables or something.
As long as they don't exceed I believe a maximum of 35% of the office, retail, and the church building. I think it's either 30 or 35% as restaurant, which is unlikely to happen given the fact that 3 stories of the 4-story building are office, which is a much less parking intensive use. So instead of doing the 1 to 300 for the aggregate square footage, we do 1 to 250. So it parks a variety of uses. So we're at a greater parking ratio than just the 1 to 300 office retail, but we're at a lesser parking ratio than if we parked all 50 or 60,000 square feet as restaurant space. So it's just an easy way to park it.
I kind of see where if you had an event that takes place at night, then of course you're going to have all the office spaces that you can use. But if you have an event that takes place during the day, such as any type of meeting, convention type thing, I would certainly think, 22 spaces isn't going to do much of anything for anyone thinking they want to plan an event in that space.
Well, I don't think that...
I do want to make sure,
yeah.
That we're, that we do have the adequate parking for what we're envisioning happening in this.
I think that there is also going to be kind of a, even though I mentioned that the shared parking reduction isn't really a good use of terminology there, I think that there is going to be kind of a synergy there, a shared parking dynamic between the variety of uses there, and that there will be open spaces that will be available to be used by the various uses. So while our formulas would require 22 spaces for that particular use, there would be, that is just kind of isolating that one particular building, whereas it's in the context of a much larger parking structure. But I certainly understand what you're saying. Depending on the size of the function, it could really warrant.
Whether it's day or night.
Yeah.
I mean, you would hope, I would think they would want to have both day and night events. Maximize the use of their space. Mr. Taylor?
Yes, ma'am. So a big portion of that is, and that shared philosophy goes back to the overlap in time when these are going to be used. One, we don't anticipate that every room in this hotel is actually going to have a car there when they come in. More and more you're seeing Uber, Lyft, maybe 2 different rooms are there for in one vehicle. Maybe it's a tour bus dropping somebody off. And so what we're talking about is stacking every use. I think that chart outlines that if we had every use parked to its maximum capacity that's required on the site, you've got required parking of 556. And so we're still 75 spaces beyond what would be there if you didn't give us any credit for the shared. But very commonplace in more urban downtown developments, shared is a very realistic scenario and is very commonplace, especially when you're talking about these garages. You hate to have an empty garage as expensive as those are. And so we as a design team, from our history and our background, as well as the owners, are very comfortable with the number that we're proposing here, really overly comfortable in so much that we're saying there's going to be 200 unassigned spaces here. So we think we're going to have empty spaces a great deal of time at this location.
And I think one way to also think about it is within the context of a walkable environment that is downtown, is that, as opposed to going to the Avenue, when you drive to the Avenue and to go to a particular store, here there's kind of a walkable environment where you may park at the City Hall parking garage, go hit a boutique on the square, and then walk down, have a bite to eat at Marina's, and then walk down to one of the shops at this building. And so I think that some of the demand, or some of the parking demand that will be generated by these uses will be accommodated in the parking in this structure, that other people who will be using the downtown at large as a shopping destination will be parking elsewhere on the square, in the judicial building parking garage, the city hall parking garage, and spreading out some of those vehicle trips.
Ms. Garland, any other questions?
I'll just say, I mean, I completely understand the way that the numbers will be utilized. I just want to make sure that, and the fact that you've got all of the additional parking spaces makes up for it, but if you're designating things in certain ways and somehow the residences don't have enough designated for themselves, or the hotel are having to park further away because they can't find their assigned parking place. You just look at things like in your average projections for the hotel between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. to say that it's going to need 20 parking spaces seems a little low. I'm assuming that also accommodates staff. Just a few things here and there that it's just some assumptions in there that.
Sure, and so, you know, those are assumptions or best guesses, but I've spent a fair amount of time out along Medical Center. Those parking lots are very empty during the day, I would say, and you'll have some cleaning staff. Most of these are running on, 4 or 5, 6 employees, so it works very, very well.
Yeah.
Staff tends to be rolling in as you're rolling out, so.
I agree. I think overall there's enough parking spaces there. I just questioned a little bit of the allocations on some of the breakdown of the chart is all.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And first, let me say how excited I am, and I appreciate everything you guys are doing to bring to fruition a dream that we had a few years back from the city's aspect, and at least from my aspect, when the bank was talking about leaving the property, and there was very little vision of what would happen to the property. And I think a couple of the city leaders, as well as myself, saw the importance of trying to do our very best to preserve the bell tower and the sanctuary, because when you come up Church Street, it is an iconic site for us to preserve it, and it is a heart of Murfreesboro. When you think of iconic landscapes in Murfreesboro, that is one of them for me. And so there's one that's already there, and we're preserving that, and it's not inexpensive, as those of you who maintain historic houses in Murfreesboro know. It's not cheap to refurbish a project when you're starting with a building in the condition it's in, and truthfully, it's not in the condition that we remember it. If you've ever attended a service or something in that church, or a wedding or something, it doesn't look like that anymore, I'll assure you. And so the interior of the building is going to need a phenomenal amount of restoration in order to bring it up to a level of where it will be compatible with the rest of the surrounding buildings here. I've received a couple emails today of people questioning the uses of the building and the design of the buildings. And some said they were bland, and some said they were, but there's a reason that my house doesn't look like my next door neighbor's house, and there's a reason that your house doesn't look like your next door neighbor's house. We all have different tastes of what a pretty house looks like. And so I think when we get off into just personal preferences of looking at a building and saying, is this an attractive building? It's hard to look at a picture and say this is a really attractive building, or it's not an attractive building, until it comes to fruition and you look at it, and then all of a sudden you go, hey, I kind of like it, or I don't like it at all. But I do think that a couple of these structures have balconies and things on them that really make them look like living buildings, and so you can see the life and the energy from those buildings coming out onto the balcony, and I'll liken Shacklett's photography up on the square, and Bill doesn't owe me anything for his free advertisement. But Shacklett's photography, when you look at it, there's a balcony there, and there's energy up on that balcony that brings an energy to the square just because of that balcony. And I think this project will do this on this particular block. And what I didn't want us to wind up with was 4 buildings that look like the judicial building, because that, you know, it absolutely would have brought nothing to the area if we had built 4 buildings that look like monuments, because this is a place where we want to have a vibe and an energy that's exciting, and people want to look at it as a destination point. There's already people who say, we want those townhomes. So they're excited about them. There's already people who are saying, we want that office space because it's convenient to the judicial building. There's already people saying, hey, from the guy with the pharmacy, it's certainly, once this hotel is built, if I were in that hotel and I needed a bottle of aspirin, if there's a drugstore across the street, you're my guy. I mean, I'm walking across the street and I'm doing business with a downtown business. If I get hungry while I'm at that hotel, I'm going downtown to support local businesses, which are businesses that are hungry for new customers. And so this is to breathe a life back into an area that has struggled. The downtown area has struggled for several years, having the right demographic and the right people in the area that brought money into the area that helped support businesses. And when we go out and we talk to Starbucks or someone like that, they either say you don't have the head count or you don't have the right financially set people in that area to support our business. This will help that. It will absolutely improve the downtown as a whole. One thing that we've got to get beyond too is we're not Mayberry anymore. And as much as we reminisce about Murfreesboro and Old Murfreesboro, we love Old Murfreesboro, but we can't drive to Nashville and expect to park in front of the spaghetti factory if we're going to eat at the spaghetti factory. It just ain't going to happen. You have to walk a couple blocks. In the evening, we've got a judicial building that has a parking garage that sits completely empty all evening. That will be very complimentary to this project for evening events. In the daytime, a lot of the people who live in this building, they'll be gone because they're going to work. They've got their lives that they take care of as well. So there will be a flow of traffic coming and going that will be very complimentary, I think, to the downtown area. The buildings themselves, I mean, I think they all look unique. I think they're, in this particular case, I wish there was more parking, but I understand parking is very, very expensive. And if the engineers say this is adequate to support this project, as well as add some parking to the surrounding businesses, I'm good with it, because there were several people a few years back who said, Eddie, the bridge over Broad Street isn't going to help anything. And I said, I can't prove to you that it will, but I'm trusting the engineers who tell me it will. And now in retrospect, not very many people have come forward and said, hey, Eddie, I love the new bridge and it's really helped my time on getting to work. It saves me 10 minutes a day. But I know it does. And I think this same impact will be on our downtown area. I think it will help our parking situation, because it is actually going to bring some parking to the area, and definitely some energy and some excitement of buildings that were truthfully almost written off and said, sure, they're pretty, sure, they're part of Old Murfreesboro, but they just didn't justify anybody going in there and spending. I mean, are we at $75 million on this project now? I mean, it was not quite, but I mean, there's a huge investment going into this block, and we're excited to see someone take that risk and invest in it, because they are investing in our city, and truly I think this is an opportunity coming to fruition that will actually be a real asset to our downtown. I think it will bring energy back to our downtown that we want when we have events like Main Street, the summer lights and stuff on the square. It gives you an option of another place that you might go and eat dinner. It gives you an option of a place that you can walk safely around the square. It brings the police back to the downtown area, which we've kind of left the area now. And not that we don't still have a presence with police officers being down there, but this is actually going to have a precinct in it, so that we do have a presence of law enforcement into that area that truly should make it a safer area and a more enjoyable area to get out in the evenings and walk and feel comfortable with your family. So I think it's going to add to the quality of life of downtown, and I'm excited, and I can't wait to see it come to completion.
Thank you, Mr. Schneider. I wanted to make one comment just in relation to the number of phone calls and emails that we got yesterday and today, I guess after the neighborhood meeting Monday night. And I feel like, you know, I think everybody is so excited about the project, including all of us up here. But what I heard over and over again was concern about the architecture and the style. I think probably, I'm just guessing that you took direction from the city in this style that we have here, and that when everybody here at the city said we want to, you know, continue the look of downtown Murfreesboro, what you picked up on was the newer buildings that we built recently in the downtown area. I do feel, and I think that is where the historic side of downtown Murfreesboro is kind of upset with this design. But I do feel like after seeing tonight, and I appreciate very much bringing the material boards, just seeing some of the texture in the bricks and the materials and things that you're using, that is something you don't see looking at these pictures. I think that makes a big difference in what the total look and feel of the building and the project will be. I do hope that along the way, as all those little things come up through the actual construction of the project, if we get that far, that anytime there's a decision to be made on anything, that, you know, you would always choose whatever is going to provide the most character for the building, so that we can feel like it is not just another everyday building that got built in a downtown, that it is something that provides that character and that, again, makes that project that we will all be so proud of and so excited about, and be able to promote and be excited. So I do see the concerns from the pictures, and for those of you that have to come in here on a regular basis, you know that I have trouble with that. So I need help with the, you know, seeing the actual things. The pictures are sometimes I have a hard time with that. So I appreciate bringing all that in, but I do feel better about seeing all that. And I hope that, you know, that will be something that a lot of the people that were concerned would feel better about too. And I'm taking maybe yes, since I don't think we have anywhere near the number of people you all had Monday night. So, other comments from the Planning Commission? Questions, concerns?
To address that, Ms. Jones, I think we made a commitment on Monday night. We'll make it again here tonight on both selection of character and the construction aspects. We told everybody there, we want to be good neighbors. We're going to be here a long time. We're making a substantial investment, and so our decisions and our process and our what we do in the field is going to be about being a good neighbor. So I think that all of that is a fair commitment to be made, and a fair request from yourself as well as the neighbors.
Appreciate that very
Yes,
much. And I guess from you and I guess the city's staff, in regards to Mr. Beckman's concern, you know, do we feel like that is going to be something that, I mean, their businesses right there along that area have to still be able to survive, and
So
I mean, an hour or two here and there or something?
From our perspective, and we were very honest with the neighbors the other night, is there will be times where we have deliveries that are coming in for materials that you can't help, but if you want to do it safely, you've got to shut down at least part of the street. You may not have to shut down the whole street, but we see those as being very limited instances. We'll have some utility tie-ins that may shut down a whole, you know, one portion of the block. But by no means do we envision for a whole city block to be shut down for 2.5 years. We see those as being very flexible shutdown times. If you drive by the site today, you see the type of fencing that's very movable, and so we can extend that fence out for a limited period of time. we're done with what we need to do, we pull it back in and open those spaces back up. So we fully intend on keeping those open. All of that's right away, so we'd have to coordinate all that right away timing with city engineering, traffic department. They're very sensitive about those things. I know that whenever Lytle Street and the Judicial Center was going on, that whole street was torn up just because of the city's road project there. And so I would say that the Judicial Center contractors took advantage of that. I would have, but I don't think that we'll have quite the same liberties here. And so that is a very sensitive matter to us, absolutely.
And I'll also add that the city does understand the challenges of operating a business in an area where there's construction going on. And I think the bridge is a good example of us being lax on some of the signage that we permitted as far as the enforcement of signage. And the reason we did that was we understood that those businesses faced challenges because of our actions. And so in the case that if there is a need for a sign that is to be put up in a different location than where it might currently be, as a temporary sign to help the business during the time of construction. We have a history of showing some flexibility and a willingness to make sure that we do everything we can to make sure that your business is protected during that construction phase.
Other comments or questions?
I'll just make a comment about the architecture. I'm not an architect by any stretch of the imagination. I'm big on first impressions. When I first saw this, the first time I really saw the whole project was at our last Planning Commission meeting prior to setting the public hearing. My first impression was I liked it. Honestly, it's the first time I've taken one of these booklets home and showed it to my family, just because I was so excited about the project. I was proud to be able to be part of the Planning Commission and looking at this project. I think it's going to be a game changer for downtown Murfreesboro, and I'm going to vote for this project.
Mr. Halliburton?
I do think it's important that we mention that a couple years ago, when we were first talking about this project, we actually posted boards that were in this area to ask for public comments because we wanted feedback as to what they wanted on this property and what their desire was. And we listened to those, and not only then did we listen to them, but we had 4 different people that come in and give presentations of what they wanted to put on this property. And one of them didn't preserve the church or the sanctuary or the bell tower, either one. One of them, I think, preserved the bell tower only. And they were quickly removed from the list because we felt like we had made it clear on the front side that the preservation of the sanctuary and the bell tower were important parts of this project. Some of them basically brought back, I'll use the term George Jetson type buildings where they looked very futuristic and very modern looking and we felt didn't fit in with the neighborhood. And so when we finally did decide that there was a company that we were looking at that would potentially build what we had that was close to what we were desiring, we said go back to the drawing board and here's some of the things we want you to do. We want you to go out and look at Oakland Mansion. We want you to go out and look at the university. We want you to go around the square and look at the buildings. And I know that I'm just sitting here looking at the cover of the book and there's arches over the church doors and some of the windows on the front of the church. And if you'll notice, the hotel has arches above the buildings as well as the retail business behind it has arches and stuff that kind of mimic it without copying it. And so I think they're trying to go with a period look without just duplicating a building and trying to match the brick. And because I think that would have been very boring if we'd have just had one block of the same structure. We're not building a prison, we're building a 4 individual businesses that truly, I think, are going to be beautiful when they're done, and will be very attractive. And I think it'll be, truthfully, I was kind of like Ken. I carried my booklet home and I showed it to my family as soon as we got these drawings, and said, "What do y'all think?" And they were excited. They felt like it was, going in the direction of something that they thought would be attractive, and so I really think that an effort was made to send it back and say, come back with something that looks with more energy, something that the buildings look more alive, and the balconies were added, which the balconies themselves are really designed to look like old fire escapes off of the side of Princess Theater. So there really was a consciousness made of trying to add things that really were a part of historic Murfreesboro. So, this is really, to me, an exciting time when we look at this project and see an opportunity to see an entire area developing that will truly change our downtown.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? All right. We'd like a motion.
I'll make a motion we approve, subject to all staff comments.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thanks very much. Congratulations, and we're excited. All right. Our next item will be an annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 26.8 acres located along New Salem Highway and Barfield Road. New Salem Land Development, LLC is the applicant. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. The subject property is located along the south side of New Salem Highway and east of Barfield Road. It is a total of 26.8 acres in size. A portion of the large parcel is already located within the city limits and is not part of that annexation. The property does include 1 single-family residence as well as a barn and ancillary structures on the property. There is also a cell tower located towards the south, and there was a separate parcel that was originally earmarked or had a pump station or lift station, and is no longer used for that. So the property owner owns all 3 parcels that's part of this subject area. The property is located within the Murfreesboro urban growth boundary. There is an accompanying application to zone the property to commercial highway, and that is the next item on the Planning Commission agenda tonight. Staff has prepared a plan of services. The services from the city can be provided upon annexation, and through that study, the conclusion was that there are no major issues or any impacts that would be affected by the annexation. The Planning Commission will need to conduct a public hearing and formulate a recommendation to the City Council. The applicant's representative is here, and that is Mr. Matt Taylor, and I'm happy to answer any questions from the Commission if so needed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rush. All right. Any questions from the Planning Commission before we open the public hearing? Okay, we'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak on this item. Okay, we'll close the public hearing. Questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
Hearing none, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, state aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. So the next item, the companion zoning request, is a zoning application for approximately 26.8 acres located along New Salem Highway and Barfield Road to be zoned CH simultaneous with annexation, and approximately 1.1 acres to be rezoned from RS15 to CH. New Salem Land Development, LLC is the applicant. Ms. Rush.
Thank you. This is the accompanying application for the zoning. As indicated, it is located south of New Salem Highway, east of Barfield Road. The annexation portion is the 26.8 acres, and the portion that's in the city limits existing is 1.1 acres. So it's a total of 27.9, or approximately, I like to round up, 28 acres in size. There is no specific development proposed at this time. This is a request for bulk zoning. The zoning districts that are adjacent to the property is RM16 to the north. It is not currently developed, but could be developed with apartments in the future. Also zoned is CH, which is the same as the requested zoning. CH zoning is also located on the properties to the west. West property is currently developed with World Outreach Church. So those are properties that are currently developed. And to the south, it's RSA1. And to the east, it is RSA1. And a little further east of the river is RS15. So those are residential properties. The future land use map does identify this property as general commercial. The CH zoning that's requested is consistent with general commercial. There is a portion, somewhat minor portion along the south property line that is designated by the future land use map as general residential. That portion would not be consistent with the zoning that's requested. So the Planning Commission should discuss this to see if extending the zoning to CH in that area where it's inconsistent with the map is an appropriate change of the future land use map for this particular use. Again, the representative is here if he would, is responsible, or can respond to any questions that the commission might have. This concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair Lady Jones. I'm Matt Taylor. I'm accompanied by the applicants on the project, and we'll be happy to answer any questions. As Ms. Rush said, we don't have a specific development plan. We are working on several potential tenants, potential buyers out here, but we think it's a natural extension of what's going on Salem Highway, just across the river there, and the success that is ongoing there. So we're excited about the project. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Taylor? Okay, thank you, Mr. Taylor. We'll open the public hearing and ask anybody to come forward that would like to speak. Okay. We'll close the public hearing. Ask for any other comments or questions from the Planning Commission.
I'm full of comments tonight, so I guess I'll make one. This particular property is located right next to the corner there of New Salem and Barfield. The property that is on the corner is commercial highway property. The properties that are currently RS15, I don't think anybody would build their dream home at this intersection just because of what is there and what will potentially be there. So I think it's the commercial highway use is a very good use for this property. It also has an excellent buffer behind it with the river back there, and I think the use of this property would be significantly more advantageous to the city if it were commercial highway. So unless there's anybody else with a comment, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you all very much. Our last public hearing tonight will be zoning ordinance amendment for outdoor storage, temporary and accessory structures and uses, review time limits, lighting, and yard encroachments. City of Murfreesboro Planning Department is the applicant. Ms. Green.
Thank you. Our final public hearing this evening is for you to consider amendments to the zoning ordinance. They have been provided in your packet, but I'm also circulating the printed version in case you would like to reference that during this portion of your meeting. Staff was approached and asked to write a zoning ordinance amendment specifically regarding the storage of tires, either new or used outside. The Building Codes Department has been working on some codes ordinances with existing storage of tires, so our proposed amendments would affect new sites. It's not the existing sites. And so we took an opportunity to address that concern brought to us by City Council and our administration department, but then also look at other opportunities that we could make, update the zoning ordinance to work with for us. So I'd like to just go through the parts that are in here. If you have any specific questions, of course, I'll be happy to answer them, but it's basically divided into several sections. The first is, as I mentioned, regarding outdoor storage of tires. We are adding a prohibition that those not be stored outside in open, uncovered areas. So if it's piled up, or in converted mobile units such as tractor trailers or storage pods. The codes amendment that's going through would address those that you might have been familiar with that are currently existing, because the zoning, of course, would grandfather anything that's existing in, but the city code amendment would address those. We're also asking to revise the language that deals with the storage of mobile storage units. They're currently in the zoning ordinance, and human occupancy is prohibited and storage is prohibited in residential uses. We're proposing to continue to prohibit that in residential uses, but also to extend the prohibition for institutional used properties, and then not allow those types of accessory structures to be used on any lot for human occupancy. And then to expressly prohibit storage of tires within those type units. So what you might see behind Lowe's would continue to be permitted. It's not something that we're at this time proposing to eliminate, but maybe the sites that are out of compliance with the code amendments wouldn't be able to bring in just tractor trailers and put the storage in there for a limited amount of time. Also proposed is an amendment to our zoning ordinance, which requires you hold a public hearing within 45 days of the planning department receiving an application for the public hearing. I have heard from planning commission in times past that sometimes you wanted more time between the workshop where you're first considering the item and the actual public hearing. So we are building in enough time to have about 3 months to put the public hearing in the future. I think our normal business would be to schedule it for the next meeting, but if it does come up that you do have questions or concerns, or you want them to go back and look at something a little bit further, this gives you some more flexibility. The reason in the past I've said, oh no, you need to go ahead and schedule a public hearing, the reason we need to do that is not because of state law, but it's because of what's in our own zoning ordinance. So I thought that designing in some flexibility might be beneficial to you, although you probably most of the time will just go ahead and schedule it for the next meeting. Something else?
You would have the flexibility to continue to do what you just said.
Right, whereas now you don't.
Right.
Now you really have a shot clock. If they're not willing to postpone, this would give you a couple months longer.
But the opposite works too. You're not going to have to wait 90 days. You're going to have the ability to have that public hearing at the next available okay.
Yes, you'll have that ability.
Okay.
It's just if you thought that you needed to push it out, you could do that, whereas currently you don't. With the dates and submittals, you don't have that. We're asking to update some language in our zoning ordinance that says that administratively approved site plans have 14 days that they need to be approved or denied, and you know that we changed our process a little over a year ago. And so our process currently doesn't align with that 14 days, so we're proposing just to give it the same time frame as planning commission type plans. Right now, it takes about 1 week less to review plans administratively, but we have changed the threshold for administrative plans so that more qualify for administrative and less are required to come to planning commission. So we wanted to make sure that that language was consistent with our process, and so basically that's what it's doing. There's some work that we're proposing that some people call belts and suspenders, some call cleaning up, where it references a building codes official. And we're proposing to replace that with planning director, because the way that we operate, it's actually the planning director who's responsible for some of those duties. And in one case, we are proposing to change it to floodplain administrator, because that would be their determination. The design guidelines currently require minimum lighting standards for multifamily developments and for single-family attached condos and parking areas and within walkways. All other components of the design guidelines are exactly the same as the zoning ordinance, but the zoning ordinance does not speak to the minimum lighting standard. So I'm proposing just to add the same language that's in the design guidelines to the zoning ordinance text so that it's the same in both locations, and it's just a little bit easier to read and make sure that that's clarified. It was something that I think we were doing our SEPTED study and preparing the design guidelines, we thought that there actually should be a minimum, and the only type of development in Murfreesboro that does have a minimum lighting standard is for those multifamily developments, and we're really looking because there's more density. Oftentimes there's parking areas and walkways, so we just want to make sure they stay safe. Of course, the Planning Commission has the option to add or require additional lighting if they need. So these are the highlights of what we're proposing. If you have any questions, of course, like I mentioned, I'd be glad to answer them. Otherwise, you should conduct a public hearing prior to formulating your recommendation to City Council.
Okay, any questions for Ms. Green before we open the public hearing? Okay, if not, we will open the public hearing and ask if there's anybody that would like to come forward to speak. If I don't see anybody out there, I don't guess there is.
Roman's still here. Someone's on the way.
Yes, I don't think he's going to come speak. So we will close the public hearing. Any further questions or comments from the Planning Commission?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, Ms. Green, for all that work. And then staff reports and other business. I understand Mr. Ives has a couple of items for us tonight.
I got to have a little bit of attention tonight, so I have a couple items of other
We're
business.
lonely over there, I know.
Let's first talk about a sewer line easement. Siegel Landing Townhomes is a project coming in across Cherry Lane from the Siegel Soccer Park. And in order to provide sewer out to that project, we need to extend a sewer line across the parking lot area of Siegel Soccer Park. There's a drawing attached that shows you where that goes. It is designed so that it'll have minimal work, minimal impact on the parking lot and on people utilizing the site. Park and Rec has, we've worked with them, they've approved this, and Water and Sewer approves the location of it. So we request that you consider this and formulate a recommendation to City Council as to granting this easement actually it'll be a declaration of easement that the city itself will declare an easement to itself for the sewer line in order to connect sewer to this project.
Okay, questions for Mr. Ives? If not, we need a motion.
Make a motion, we approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. And second, a couple of years ago, the city acquired 2 parcels of land totaling about 154 acres. The land is about 1.25 miles west of Veterans Parkway and on the north side of State Route 96, Franklin Road. The plan was to use this for park space, potentially a fire station, and perhaps other city uses. As further analysis has been done, more consideration, it's been decided that the park aspect of this will be better served if we can, at a different location other than this. So as we were looking at things, the county school district contacted us. They have need for more school sites, and they selected this one as a potential for building a couple of schools. So we've been in discussion with them, and there's actually a contract now being negotiated. It hasn't been signed yet. I don't know whether or not there's actually money appropriated from the county to buy this or not, but at least we are in negotiation with the school districts for this. With the, I think, consensus of administration and Parks and Rec that a different site would be better for our future park west of the interstate. We're requesting that you consider this and make a recommendation to City Council with respect to the city disposing of this, selling this land. I think the contract, as I understand it, will have us essentially pretty much breaking even from our cost and the expenses. We've done some surveying and some soils testing and that sort of thing, and I think that we would be transferring those documents and those test results and all of that to the county and be essentially reimbursed for it. So I think we'll come out whole on it. And then there's an outline showing this property that's attached to this.
And so I take it that the city has some other land that they already know of or are considering?
We're looking at a couple of different places and in consideration on a couple of places that we're working on, yes. Don't have anything under contract or nothing quite even to the point of a handshake deal yet, but we are working on some, and hopefully we'll be coming back before too long with one of those.
And I would just say, I guess, you know, I take it our councilman from here would go forward with this, that, you know, if we make a recommendation that this is, we approve this, and then you've got a contract and we're going to lose X number of dollars, and you say, well, the planning commission approved it. Well, okay, you know.
Well, normally, planning commission doesn't go into the financial details.
Right.
This body makes a recommendation that acquisition of this land is a good idea, or sale of this land is a good idea, or granting this easement is an acceptable, good idea. But it's up to council and administration to negotiate the terms, and you know, if we end up making money, that's fine, and if we end up losing money, then that's the decision council and administration will make, that, okay, we made a bad choice, we need to get out of it, this is what we get out. I mean, that does happen now and then. We haven't made many of those, I don't think, from my experience, but it certainly can happen. But I think we're going to come out whole, or at least very, very close to whole on this if this transaction goes forward.
And so our recommendation is just in regard to a land use issue.
Yes.
And whether this, you know, we would recommend this because we know you've got something in mind to replace it.
And Madam Chair, to address the point you made, I'm going to abstain from the vote just because of what I may end up voting on at the council level. I don't know exactly where I'm going to be on that, so I'm going to abstain from the vote here.
Which means I'm the one who's going to be held fully accountable for this.
What do we need to do tonight, or do we need to know more about it before we?
Let me give you a little backstory on this, and maybe this will help some of you with your decision as to where we need to go. When we bought this property initially, we felt that we already had one piece of property that was out next to Burnt Knob Road that we were considering for park property, and we're constantly looking for what is the best use for this property. And when we acquired that property, we initially thought that perhaps it would be park, and we still intend on putting some of it to park use. But there may be a better use because of its location of being at the intersection of Veterans Parkway and 840 as far as the city's development. So when this piece of property became available, it was at a very reasonable price, and we bought it because we thought we were buying it for less than what we felt market value was. At this point, I think the county is in search of property for a high school in this area, and there is a limited number of properties that would be available in this size that would be available for sale. And being as we had bought it initially at what was a good price, according to what market would indicate, I think we're willing, from our aspect, we're willing to pass the savings that we made on that property along to the county, because we understand that the county high school that will go on that property will be a service to the citizens of the city of Murfreesboro as well. So the best use of it, although we initially thought that it might be park and a fire station and some of the other things that we might have considered, now that the county has said this is where we want to build our high school, it has now become apparent to us who have to make the decision on the financial part of it, is it advantageous for us to sell it to the county? And I think we're at the point now that we're going, okay, maybe it's better for them to use it for that and us to find some property that's a little closer into town to provide a park on. And so that's kind of the direction that we've gone. This is a little ways outside of town. when we built Sports Garden, it was outside of town, so I'm not going to say that the city won't grow that direction, but because of the limited amount of sewer capacity and the way the city has kind of been limited on our sprawl, and we're going to more of a density and an upward growth now, I think that this is probably so far out that it would probably continue to be a park outside the city limits if we were to develop it as a park. Currently, the capital improvement plan does have money in it, but it doesn't have the money to build the park, so the money is not yet appropriated to build the park, so there's no sense of urgency for us to maintain and keep this piece of property and say this is where we're going to build our park, because we still have time to look at other locations, and we think there are some better locations that would be more easily accessible, closer into town than this piece of property. So, and we really don't see a whole lot of future improvement to Highway 96 unless somebody goes out there and builds something substantial that would justify the increase. The numbers on 96 as far as traffic are actually going down, which amazes me, but I guess everybody has now decided they're going to use 840 rather than 96. And so the traffic count is going down, and when you've got a decreasing traffic count, it's going to be a rare case where the state will come in and say, we're going to help you widen the road when the traffic count is actually going that direction. We've got several places in Murfreesboro where we see traffic counts going up, and we would certainly encourage the state to help us fund those intersections and those right-of-ways before we would ask for approval on this particular section of Highway 96. It does seem to be that the development of 96 is coming from Franklin towards Murfreesboro and not necessarily from Murfreesboro towards Franklin. So with all that information, I hope that kind of clears up some of the concern. I don't think we've got any immediate plans, and we're certainly not putting off building a park on this property because there's no funding in place yet for that park. So there will be other opportunities, I hope, that come forward, and certainly we're pursuing some opportunities that we think we have.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. I'm certainly not against our county having the ability to build schools that definitely do support us, the city as well. So I just don't want to be given a blanket statement that, Planning Commission approves something that, we don't know the end result yet of what's going to happen. But I'd say if the council approves it, we would be in favor of it. I would be.
Well, I guess the question comes back to, though, does it have to come now before the negotiation happens, or does it need to be, or can it go later?
State law requires that when property is acquired or sold or the use is changed, the property that the city owns, that the Planning Commission should consider that and make a recommendation. Some of the practicalities of how things work make this the amount of planning that the Planning Commission actually does on some of these is less than on other things, but state law does require that it come to Planning Commission. Again, I was tasked to bring this tonight. I was involved in purchase of the property, but I'm not involved. I think Mr. Smothers has been far more involved in the discussions about what we should do where and what, okay, is this really the best place for a park, and a variety of considerations that come up to that that have been probably made a combination of the administration level and Park and Rec Department level and financial level as opposed to true planning level. But nonetheless, we are required to bring this to this body, and
But you're required to bring it to if we are going to recommend a sale of the property.
well, as a practical matter, I mean, even if the Planning Commission were to say, we don't think this is a good idea, we think the city should keep this, council could still sell it.
Right.
They still have the power to sell it. And no, certainly you're free to make that recommendation if that's how four of you feel. Or, with the material that I was able to provide and the additional background that Mr. Smotherman was able to provide, I guess I would ask that you see fit to recommend, that approve council disposing of this property, assuming, of course, that we can reach a contract, because we don't have one signed, and even if we had one signed, I'm not sure that money's been appropriated to close the transaction anyway, which, of course, obviously there's a number of steps before this would actually happen. So, I guess that's my request.
I appreciate you asking the question, Ms. Jones, because it is a quick vote on this without a lot of history on it. And so thankfully we have Mr. Smotherman's history. And then the other thing that I would say we have to rely on here is the fact that the Parks and Recs have likely done their due diligence here to say, this is what it was bought for. We've gone through an exercise to say that is not the right place for what we want to do moving forward. And I think your voicing it would be nice to have a little bit more background sometimes when you get this level of an ask for a recommendation when we don't know much about it. Did I make an accurate statement to say Parks and Rec, that it was purchased for the intent of a park? Parks and Rec have continued to study it, and now that body is saying it's not, in their opinion, the best use of this property that it was initially acquired for? Is that appropriate?
I would say that I think that this is still could be made into a park, and it could the facilities that the Park and Rec wants to put together out in this part of the city is possible. One of the factors that has been the annexation changes and the water and sewer changes, and are we ever going to annex out the park? We may not, but because of those changes, there's a possibility that this would remain an outside the city park. Now, is that terrible? No, we could do that. We have sewer pump stations that are outside the city. We own other property that's outside city limits and will never be inside the city. But I think that the sense is that there is a better place. This would work. It could be done. But there's a better place. And now there's another user who has a use that might be better than what we were planning. And there are alternatives, we still feel, for us to get a nice park out on the west side of town, which we're still very much in the mode to do.
Mr. Ives, to Ms. Garland's question, has the Parks and Rec Commission voted on this, or has it been in front of them? And if not, does it have to go in front of them?
It does not have to go in front of them, and I don't know whether it's been discussed at Park and Rec Commission or not. I don't attend those meetings.
I am on the Parks and Recreation Commission. Dang it. So I guess I get blamed for that as well. But the Parks and Recreation, we have had meetings which we look at the parks and what potential parks we have out there. And we've looked at a couple locations and said, are these the perfect places for us to build our parks? And and certainly we're ready to build a park on the west side. There's no question. There's no back away from that. But both pieces of property that we've acquired, we think, have a better use. And so we're kind of at the point now that we're just looking at best use for the property, and still diligently looking for the piece of property that is not so far out that we're going to have to run the sewer lines and stuff to a certain extent because of expense of trying to develop that property. It faces challenges that property that would be located more into town would not provide those challenges. And so it's not a question of whether or not we're intending to build a park. We still have full intentions of building a west park, but we've looked at plans, everything that showed defined ball fields, defined uses on the property as far as tennis courts and all the different layouts on these properties, and not that these properties could not be used for that, but at this point we still feel like there's probably a better opportunity to look at a different piece of property that might have more upside on it. Obviously, we can't continue to buy properties if we don't get rid of some. And I think in this particular case, the best use of this property is probably for the county to use it as a school property. And if we were relieved of this responsibility of owning this property, then that would probably give us more flexibility in looking at other properties.
So could we make a motion that we would recommend that city council begin negotiations, or that we would recommend they investigate and negotiate potential acquisition of this property, and that if they so deem it, then we approve it? You know,
I'm not sure I understood that.
that's really the bottom line. I mean, can we just make a recommendation that they continue on with their negotiations or their considerations of this contract, and should they determine that this is not the place for the park and someplace else will be, then we would approve that. We approve that.
Yes, yes, I think that would be a sufficient motion.
I'm sure somebody else can state it better than I. Do you get the idea of what I'm trying to say? I mean,
I have a curiosity question just to belabor this application even further. We keep talking about sewer and the going out to this property. Does not a county school have to have sewer accessibility to build, or are they in a position to put it on step systems?
I think the answer to that is that if the city was going to extend a sewer line out to this property, we would extend a gravity sewer of 8, 10, or 12-inch line this 1.25 miles, and then plus whatever we had to do in the property. If the county builds, and then other people out there would have the right to tap onto this with limitations and restrictions, but still some right for other people to tap onto it. If the county builds a school out there, most likely it will be done the way Christiana schools were done and the way we're looking at doing the school down at Tan Oak Downs down south. The county will put in, essentially, they will put in a grinder pump system and a tight line, like a 2-inch or 3-inch pressure line. So they will then pump to the nearest regular sewer line, and no one else will hook onto that.
I'm with you.
So the dollars to put that tight line in are substantially, I don't know the amount, but they're substantially less than running a regular sewer line out there.
Okay.
So that is one of the factors.
So I'll try to word a motion here in correlation to Ms. Jones's comments that we approve this mandatory referral with the hopes that the city council can negotiate a contract associated with the sale to the county that is to their liking, to their agreement.
acceptable.
Yeah, that is acceptable to the council.
And I think that would be better if we said, if the staff were to negotiate and this with the council's approval.
Agreed.
Right.
So I think we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, so we will take a vote. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Yeah, one abstention.
Make a
Thought
comment
that was
after
going to
the-
be easy, Mr. Ives, didn't you?
No,
Sorry about that.
Comment
Fine.
after the vote, but I know this is outside of the normal process, but if this was in and of itself, I would probably not approve it. But knowing that it's going to a school, then I would definitely be for it. But in and of itself, I would not approve getting rid of land before I had a pitch on another piece of land, because we're leaving an open checkbook. And I know we're not doing the checkbook thing here, but you understand the gist of what I'm saying.
That's a good point. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, any other staff reports or any other business?
Ms. Jones, One thing I wanted to say real quick, I wanted to acknowledge Ms. Rush, Ms. Green, and Ms. Kerr. They all had items tonight that took a significant amount of heavy lifting, and I see the work that they do every day. And it's a testament to their hard work and their love of the community that we were able to boil down a lot of hard work on some complicated items to 2 hours, save Mr. Ives additional items that took us over a little bit. But it's, you know, I see it every day, and I see, you know, they take these projects that are very, very complicated, ordinance amendments, plan developments, annexations, and they work very, very hard with our developers, development community, and the public, and it shows in their work, and I wanted to acknowledge that.
Excellent work, and thank you.
Thank you.
All of you all, and
Here, here.
you too, Mr. Blomley. So, all
You're
right.
not bad either, Mr. Ives. So.
We can't forget Ms. Jacob.
Yes, Carolyn.
Y'all can wrap this up. I got another meeting I got to go to.
We stand adjourned.